Now, this obviously requires a collective effort, not just from those groups and from groups like them, but from communities, neighbors, businesses, corporations. People can no longer say, this is not my problem. Micah and Ray.
Thank you, Tanya. And thanks for staying with us for tonight's discussion. Let's get straight to our new panel of experts for more on the subject of crime prevention. Curtis Amir Toller is the Director of Outreach with Chicago CRED. He's a former gang leader who changed his life. He's now dedicating it to intervention and helping at-risk young men.
Rahman Mohammed is the Deputy Chief of Detectives with the Chicago Police Department. He is also now working with youth and crime prevention efforts within the department.
And Ashley Perkins is with the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago. Ashley is the lead nonviolence trainer and coordinator, where she incorporates conflict mediation, forgiveness, and reconciliation into their workshops.
And last but not least, you probably recognize her. It's Tal Hassak-Lowy. She is the executive director of Friends for the Children. And as I said in my piece, Tal's organization focuses on youth mentoring. So Tal, we're going to start with you. We hear a lot of politicians talk about putting resources towards the problem, throwing a lot of money at a problem, but people who are really living the life that needs this attention, they rarely see a direct impact by these resources. What is one specific thing that we could do to help immediately?
I think investing in young children is critical, and not thinking of it as violence prevention, but thinking about support that every child needs to overcome the obstacles in their lives. Too often we're waiting to help. We're not providing support for kids that have experienced significant trauma and stress and hardship in their lives, and then start to hate on them when they become teenagers and get into trouble, and just throw interventions at them later, and forgetting that they're kids that just need opportunity, support that can open up opportunity like every other child.
Great answer. And let's go to Rahman here. Now, Rahman, we heard the word trust being used a lot here in Tanya's piece. The question is, if you are not able to reach someone when they're young, say in elementary school, how difficult does it then become to get a community involved to help deter somebody from turning to a criminal lifestyle long term?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. Well, I'll say this, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. We have to continue those conversations. We have to continue to reach out to our youth. We've got folks like Curtis that's on the ground. You know, I'm born and raised in Chicago, South Side, and, you know, and I still live in the communities that we're talking about here. So to continue these conversations, you know, from the youth on up to teenage and even into their young adult years. So, you know, it's not impossible to reach those who some may think are unreachable.
Well, how do young people respond to you, and how do you really get into the through the tough exterior for those who may not feel like they can trust you right away?
Sure. Well, personally, you know, just given my life's experience, you know, I start out by humanizing myself. I have to separate myself from what I do. And that begins with, you know, just giving them a little background, you know, how I grew up, the neighborhood that I grew up in, Jeffrey Manor on the southeast side, you know, and the things that I've seen as well. So, you know, I'm able to relate to a lot of things that the youth and some of these young adults have gone through or are going through, because, you know, I've seen it myself. So I'm able to switch hats, so to speak. I can take off the police hat and put on my my neighborhood hat from the communities in which I grew up in.
I'd like to go to Ashley. What is your perspective on that and this whole notion of community policing? From your perspective, how can that work?
Well, I would say repairing fractured relationships, I would say, and just providing safe spaces to talk through what I like to call courageous conversations. And when you think about the origin or the root word of courageous, it's courage. And courage is understanding that things are hard, but you still choose to persist. And so I would say just offering restorative spaces, safe spaces to have difficult conversations, to identify gaps, and strain in relationships to repair fractured relationships.
But do you think is the investment in community policing really wisely spent?
Well, I would have to candidly say that more education in terms of being culturally competent and being fully privy to the experiences of the residents is something that I would say there should be more emphasis placed so that they can connect better. And again, when we're really thinking about the type of relationships that we want to exist between residents and police, we want it to be a relationship where there is trust, mutual trust. And so you have to start by education.
Curtis, a former gang leader, of course, now talking to gang leaders now to try to turn their lives around. Tanya mentioned it in her piece. Being a black man in Chicago, being a black man in America, being a black man, period, is not easy. And you fear the police, Rahman, no offense, regardless of whether you're black or white. How do you deal with this? How do you stop from becoming violent? How do you turn your life around?
Well, I think we have a lot of folks on the panel who can help with that, as well as others. So when you say that you have to start working younger, you have to, I think about myself, I started in what I call the street culture at about the age of 9, right? And by the time I was 15, I was deeply rooted in the street culture.
But why?
And so I think,
what made you turn to the street culture in the first place? That's the question.
Yeah, because what I didn't have was some of the mentors that I believe that a lot of the young folks need, whether you call them mentors, life coaches, et cetera. I think those things I needed, and unfortunately in our community, they weren't there. And I think one of the other things is that when you see, and until Oak Park and Sherman Park start looking like Lincoln Park, and the rest of those communities, and then I think we'll still have that problem. But again, I think we need to start younger, and we all have a collected and a vested interest in making these communities look better.
You know, you talk about not having mentors. I think a lot of it has to do with adults are afraid or just don't know how to talk to young people. And it's really so simple. It's finding some common conversation that you can have, and you can actually see a lot of these barriers come down that are there. When you say Tal or Rahman, I mean, when you start a conversation with a kid, it seems like all of a sudden it just transforms and they become this human again that you were once afraid of 5 minutes before.
I would argue that we're talking about people as though they're inevitably going to become involved in violence, and I want to challenge that notion. The young children that we serve want to be everything from a teacher to a police officer to a rock star to a news anchor person. None of the kids in our program want to grow up to be in a gang. No one, that's not on anyone's sort of vision of what they want to do. And it's making those relationships early with them and helping them address the trauma and sort of the fright that causes in their life early is going to help them, give them the support that they need so they can take advantage of other opportunities. And so, as Curtis says, they can see things beyond just the street life of what's happening.
But how do you have that conversation, Tal? I think that's really the issue, is so many people are afraid to have the conversation with these young people.
Yeah, and I think that people don't look at the humanity of these children. And I think, again, that we need to shift and start working with kids really early. You know, we start when we're in kindergarten at Friends of the Children, but to really work with them and build those relationships, right? And to break down walls and just to remember that if a teenager is really hard, has a cold exterior, it's because of a lot of hurt and fear about what's going inside, and remember that trauma that's probably happened to them.
And Curtis, how do you suggest people talk to young people?
I mean, again, first of all, they can't be afraid of them, right? And they just have to have those candid conversations with young folks. And then it also has to start in the home as well. And I think that's where some of the resources need to go, because when you think about a lot of the parents who I'm talking to now, you know, a lot of them were heavily gang involved and heavily in the street life. So until you know better, then you really don't know how to do better. So I think we have to put some of our resources really into more parenting and things like that, if that makes sense.
Curtis, how has the last year, with all of the COVID restrictions and the lack of school and programs, how has that played into all of these problems?
Oh, you see it and you hear it every day when you think about how outrageous and what the numbers look like as far as carjacking. When you think about what the numbers look like as it relates to shooting and homicides, I believe that all of that is playing having a real effect on what's going on here in the city of Chicago. And I just know that we have to and we will get under 400 homicides, something that we haven't done since 1965. And I think that we have the people on the phone and others that can get that done.
Well, some really important thoughts. We want to thank our panelists for sharing your insight with us. Curtis Amir Toler, Rahman Mohammed, Ashley Perkins, and Tal Hasek Lowy. We sure appreciate your time, and hopefully we've reached a lot of hearts and minds tonight. So thanks so much.